Here we are on beautiful Jones Street.
You saw Ted Jones.
What's up, guys, and welcome to the Ted Jones World Podcast. Just your boy today in the studio. It's finally fall, and I think we're starting to feel it. There's so many news stories going on that it's like hard to pay attention to things that are happening right in our own country. You guys know what I mean? And I think that has to do with like social media because there's so much to pay attention to. And I just think about myself, like when I woke up this morning and I was like a little bit bummed out about certain things that are going on in my life. I could just see them as so small compared to everything else that's going on in the world. You know, so let's take a quick second just to remember that if our health is okay and good, then we're okay and good. And it's so hard to remember that, you know, because there's so many things that go on and on a day-to-day basis, at least in my day-to-day basis, that will seem so minuscule to other people in the world. If we're safe and healthy, that's got to be 99% of our happiness right there. Everything else can change and things go up and down. I guess we'll get a little bit lighter now. September was the most amount of comedy sets I did in 1 month. I did 53 sets, and I'd say towards the end of the month, like the 25th, 26th of the month, as you guys are listening to this, it's October 3rd. Oh my gosh, isn't that from Mean Girls? Hey, what day is it? I asked Aaron what day it was on October 3rd. It's October 3rd. That's like the National Mean Girls Day. Okay, anyway. But 53 sets was the most I've ever done in a month. And I definitely started to feel it towards probably like 45 and 46. And I'm realizing that I think the sweet spot for me is probably around like 35-ish. So when I'm averaging like a set a night. And I think the weekend takes not a lion's share of those 53, but definitely a good amount. Like on the weekends, if I'm doing 3 or 4 shows Friday and then 4 or 5 shows Saturday, that's like almost 10 shows in a weekend. And you start to feel it. And I went down to St. Pete, Florida, but I talked about this a little bit on the last episode. I didn't get a full chance to talk about the scope. And that was a week before Hurricane Helene, which is crazy to think that that was our timing down there. When people talk about wanting to move to the South because of the better weather, when people talk about moving to the South because of the better weather, hurricanes are never mentioned. And to get insurance on your house when you live in a place like that, people don't even think about it. It's alarming about how these insurance companies now are going to jack up the rate because they know that once a year, there's a solid chance that you're going to be really affected by what if it's a blackout, if there's no Wi-Fi or some part of your house, God forbid, is going to be affected. Like it's a crazy business. Insurance is like an insane business if you think about it, because for the most part in any form of insurance, you hope that nothing bad happens, obviously. But when something bad happens, it's like they fight the person who is claiming the insurance, right? So in a place like New York, you don't really focus so much on flood insurance, right? There's like a big life insurance business, I'm sure, because there's a lot of wealthy people in New York. But when you are in the southern states, flood insurance and housing insurance is going to go through the roof. So it makes sense for people not even to get insurance, which is crazy. You know, if you're going to pay an insane rate for insurance, you're like, why do I even want to get insurance if it's going to cost this much? And then by the time the hurricane or something happens to my home, I don't even get the full benefits of it. You know, I've talked about this previously on the podcast about renting a home and owning a home, and just more so that these natural disasters happen. It kind of seems like renting a home for the most part is the move. I know it's more difficult to rent in an atmosphere and an environment where there's a lot of homes, but if you live in an apartment building and you're renting, if you think about if there's a huge flood, you can just move out. Like that's it. You move out at the end of the month. Maybe there's an issue because you have 6 or 7 months left on the lease that you'd have to potentially pay to the landlord. But if you own that home and there's a flood, you're screwed. You still owe the bank for the next 30 years. You probably owe insurance money. If there's floors below you that are affected, you owe that people money instead of the landlord. So it's crazy. I wonder if that's going to start to change the environment, because in southern states, insurance is going to go crazy. It's already nuts in places like Florida due to every single year there's a hurricane down there that affects a lot of parts of Florida. But this, if you think about places in North Carolina, like these insurance rates are going to go through the roof. That's something that I think people really aren't thinking about. And the news coverage on this hurricane, at least through what I've seen, hasn't been as much as previous hurricanes, probably due to social media, since there's unlimited amount of stories that you can watch. And it does seem that like your algorithm will hook on to what you're watching the most. But people aren't watching the news anymore. People around my age, 32 and a half, aren't watching the news. They're watching videos on their phone. So it's like, how do you get to the millennial generation? How do you get to the Gen Z with like these stories that should be out in the media? You know, like back with Hurricane Sandy, Hurricane Katrina, it was on the front page of the New York Times, and that's how they would get their news. As a newspaper, 6 p.m. nightly news. My parents would watch the 6 p.m. news. I'd be sitting with them after school. I would watch it with them. So it's like, how can we all get together and focus on the main stories that are affecting places in our own backyard, in our country? You know, I've spoken about this many times on the podcast about how I think we're finally starting to learn that real life and on the internet are two completely different things. While it being in an industry like stand-up comedy, you do need to focus on things that you're doing in real life, and then also you need to focus on things that you're doing on social media and on the social media platforms, because that's how you get leveraged out, right? Like, for example, in a place like St. Pete, where I was at 2 weeks ago, St. Pete and Tampa, if you have a huge social media presence, the way that you'd sell tickets is by having a presence on social media. It doesn't really reflect how your act is, as opposed to 15 years ago, your act would need to be, you need to be doing stand-up for 10 years in order to get that gig, and people knew from word of mouth, from videos, not from videos that you'd see online, from tapes that you know that this person can do an hour of stand-up comedy. Now, you can see people sell out rooms and sell out, maybe not theaters, but sell out comedy clubs based on how many social media followers they have. So it's a time where we're learning as a society that you need to have things that are balanced, you know? And I just feel like in media and in news, things aren't balanced. Transition over into a lighter portion of this episode. October 16th, Wednesday night at 6 p.m. We have the Snapchat Comedy Showcase in Los Angeles at the Hollywood Improv. I will be hosting this event. I'm very excited for this. So I'm going to LA in about a week and a half. That'll be exciting. I'll be out there for 4 days. And people ask me, Ted, do you like LA? And anytime I go out there, I feel like, or the past, I guess, 4 times that I've gone out there, I have felt that I haven't been that busy when I've been out there. So this particular time I am going to be busy. And I think anytime I leave New York for more than 4 days, I'm like, all right, I got to get back to New York. I just like the freaking quickness of New York. I like going out and being able to do 4 things in an hour, where in any other place in the entire country, potentially the world, or definitely the country, you can't get 4 things done in an hour. By being in New York, I mean, you can go and get lunch, you can get a haircut, you could get coffee, and then you could go to CVS. All 4 of those things in 1 hour. New York just moves at a quicker pace. I just love New York. And I understand people who are like, well, how could you live in New York? It doesn't even have any grass anywhere. Whatever. I don't really miss the grass that much. I see grass occasionally. You know, I can go to Central Park or run tarps off on, on the West Side Highway. They have some grass down there that I can put my feet in if I choose to do that. I think it might be important for me to just let you guys know that I am in a funk. It's like 2:15 p.m. right now, and naturally I haven't eaten because I don't usually eat when I do the podcast. I feel like it clouds my head, but rest assured, I still feel like my head is clouded a little bit. I did take 2 days off from doing stand-up, which is something that I don't really do that frequently. And I think it's important. Like, shout out my mom for telling me, like, yeah, you know, sometimes it's part of the creative process to take days off. But in an industry like stand-up comedy, you really are supposed to say yes to every opportunity that you're given, at least in the first, I mean, for me, like 5 years, that's really what I have been doing. And I think sometimes now it's important to say no. You know, it's important to say no, but it's also important to say yes. You got to find that balance. You know what I'm saying, kid? What else is on my mind? I'm debating getting a haircut, but I think my hair has kind of been at this length for like the last 4 or 5 months, and I'm debating getting a cut to where I look completely different. That's the thing with haircuts. I feel like anytime I've gotten a haircut in the last 4 or 5 years, I've just gone buzz cut and then I've just let it grow down to here. I don't really like getting my haircut that much. For me, it's like not relaxing. People I know have told me that they are relaxed when they get their haircuts, which I don't really like. I hear the scissors going, and then it's close to your eyes, it's close to your ears. I'm like, bro, don't cut me, man. But I don't know. I could see myself potentially getting a haircut because it's winter. And while I'm still running tarps off on the West Side Highway, how do you guys run? Or when you guys work out, do you guys ever work out without your phone with you? I understand that it's probably a little bit more difficult to work out without your phone if you live in the suburbs because you theoretically would take a lot more time to go to the gym. But I live around the corner from the gym that I go to. So I'll leave my phone at home, I'll work out, and then I'll go run, and then I'm back like an hour later. So it gives me some opportunity and some time to not be around my phone, considering literally I feel like my full-time job now is being on my phone, and the screen time hours are very up there. Hopefully it's not as much as some of the Gen Z people, like when they wake up, boom, they just hammer the phone and hit the social media apps. But I would like to think that I'm trying to post on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube and Snapchat and then put away my phone. But the thing is, when I'm doing this, sometimes, and I think I'm guilty just like you guys, I will try and refresh and watch the numbers, which isn't great. You can't be doing that. You know, ideally, you got to be posting and forgetting about it. That's what paralyzes people. And especially when I do call myself, I think, a perfectionist. And sometimes I think it's to a fault, but it also helps being a perfectionist and wanting to put out the best thing that you can put out. But this is real. If I see something that I know that I made a mistake on, maybe for like 5 minutes, I'll be like, it's okay. But then I'll just, boom, I'll go right back in and I realize that I made a mistake on it and I have to fix it. That's something that I think I can work on, is that like, as soon as I post something, I just need to forget about it. And that is something that I have trouble doing, is forgetting about something after it's already out in the open. Now, people who are my age, I'd say probably anywhere like 30 to probably like 40 years old in this industry, they realize that it's super important to post on social media, because even in any industry, I think it makes you relevant, and in building a brand, that's what you need to do. If you're building a brand, you need to post on social media. You can't be selling out comedy clubs, theaters. You can't be building a multi-million-dollar, if that's what you want to do, business by not posting on social media. That's just something that we have to do. And I think that's been apparent in the last 5 to 7 years when it started to become really big, where everybody is building their own brand. You know, like anybody that you know now, you can type their name into Google and find their brand, right? Like if I'm about to go on a date with a girl, I will, to be honest, I'll be truthful. Maybe you guys don't do this, but I do this. I will look at their Instagram, right? I will potentially Google them. But first, before I Google them, I'd say I would either go on their TikTok or look at their Instagram. I'm a vegan who plays tennis and does stand-up comedy. Like, that's what you should know before you kind of know me. And ideally, I would think that I would want somebody to meet me in the realm of stand-up comedy. Like, they'd watch me do stand-up and then be like, oh, okay, this is what this guy is. Because right away, that's also something about stand-up comedy, is that you learn a lot from a person based on what they're saying on stage. That's why it's so important to develop your character on stage. And I think people don't talk about that a lot. I love how this just started with me dating and then talking about stand-up comedy. But your brand is a big part of what people recognize you as. And years ago, it was a lot easier to see someone's brand from afar and judge it based on how you'd think about that brand. But now their brand is all over the place. So you need to be careful with how you represent yourself. I put up hundreds of thousands of pieces of content so people could theoretically search back and be like, oh, Ted Jones is this? Well, I thought he was this. But I think that's also the beauty of growing a brand. You never really know what you align with until you do something thousands of times that you're finally like, okay, this is something that I align with more than I did previously, right? So building a brand is important. And I know this has been just a ton of topics that I've spoken about. This was like a diary episode, but I appreciate you guys for listening. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm going to LA in 2 weeks to host the Snapchat comedy show. If you are industry adjacent and you'd like to attend the show, let me know. ted@tedjonesworld.com. There's a limited amount of spaces. It's going to be like around 200 people. So I'm super excited to host that show. All right, guys, thanks so much for tuning in. I freaking love you. I'll see you next time. Peace.